All right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. Let's start that conversation and see what's really going on here. And we'd like to hear from you at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. Are young people involving themselves in much riskier behavior now or not? We're talking about the spread of HIV and AIDS. Are we making progress as a country or not? And I'll start off with Dr. Celestine Mugambi here. What are the numbers showing us in terms of prevalence? Are we heading in the right direction or the wrong direction?
Okay. So good morning, and I'm happy to be here. I think as a country we have made tremendous progress since HIV was declared a national disaster. And we have seen significant decline in new HIV infections, which we call incidents, from around 101,000 in around 2014 to 22,000 as of 2022. Still very many infections, but it's a 78% drop. When you look at the AIDS-related deaths, it's from 58,000 to about 18,000 in 2022, about 68% drop. But despite the significant drop in new HIV infections, we are still seeing emerging trends and pockets of new HIV infections, especially among adolescents and young people aged 15 to 24. So of all the adult new HIV infections, this particular age band contributes about 41% of new infections. There's been a reduction, but we're still seeing a lot of infections, around 7,700 as of the last HIV estimates in 2022. Now, if you look at those statistics, the majority of the new infections are in the girls and the young women. But if you look at AIDS-related deaths, we're actually losing more boys and young men than girls and young women. If you look at access to HIV testing, we're seeing now a problem with the boys and the young men compared to the girls and the young women. If you look at also sexual debut, we've managed to reduce the sexual debut in this country. In young women, we're now at 8%, but our young boys now, about 15% of them actually have had sexual relations before the age of 15. So you just cannot look at the overall numbers. You have now to break it down by gender and also more specifically by geographical locations. We're seeing specific counties that are still giving us higher infections. But more than that, you have to look at the circumstances around the HIV infections. And for us, we're also looking at teenage pregnancies. Now, there's some particular counties which historically will have very low new HIV infections. But if you look at adolescent pregnancy data, a county like Samburu, for example, where 50% of girls are the ones who are finding at the dental clinic, then we have a problem. So when you start to overlay new HIV infections, gender-based violence, and teenage pregnancy, adolescent pregnancy rather, because we also have 10-year-old girls who are getting pregnant in this country, then it begins to show you a different picture. So for us, from a programming perspective as an institution, it's not just HIV that we are looking at. We're looking at the other dynamics around should I say consequences of early sexual debut, okay? And what are the circumstances that basically are making these young people vulnerable to that? So those are the trends that we're seeing. But increasingly, we're getting concerned about the boys and young men, because also historically a lot of focus has been on girls and young women. But the testing data is a good indicator. We've got less boys testing, but they're actually having a higher positivity rate of HIV. Yeah. So we are also working as a government and as an institution to actually put in place mechanisms to ensure that boys and young men also are able to access services, and we can do risk mitigation in this population.
What are you seeing as the emerging trends in that cohort of the 15 to 24, where the infections are rising? What's going on there? Is it that they have better information, or are they simply just reckless?
Well, I would not say they're reckless. I think and sometimes we get it wrong when you say they're reckless. You see, information is power. Information gives you the options to make choices, okay? So you make a decision based on correct information. If you look at KDHS, Kenya Demographic Health Survey, if you look at information levels, we're at about 50%, almost equal for boys and young men.
And that cohort should
for girls
be the
and
ones
young
that have the most
that cohort.
Yeah.
We did a survey sometime last year as an institution, and actually what we found was shocking. In 2023, we're still being asked, is it possible for a HIV-positive pregnant mother to get a HIV-negative baby? They don't have basic information. So if you don't have basic information, what choices are you making? But beyond that, you see, you have to have an environment that allows you to make a good choice. And so you can give them all the information. A girl knows that she's supposed to delay her sexual debut, she's supposed to stay in school. But if the environment around her does not allow that, then how have we enabled her? So you also have to look at the social support mechanisms that we have, not only as a Ministry of Health, but as a country at whole. And that's why we normally say this response is a multi-sector response. Do they have access to education, clean water? You know, the things that you actually don't think correlate to HIV, but have a direct consequence if not well thought through and if the mechanisms are not there.
Yeah.
Yes.
And let me bring in Prof on this. Prof, what have you been seeing over the time when it comes to the trends of the prevalence of HIV and AIDS?
Yes, so thank you. Thank you so much again for providing me this opportunity. Just as my colleague has already said, we have made progress generally as a country, but then among the young people, that is where the challenge is. And the trend is worrying, especially between that age group of 15 to 24. I work at University of Nairobi, and we have a program there called the O3+, funded by UNESCO. And the issues of information is actually cross-cutting. Sexual reproductive health, so we have pregnancies among that age group. We have HIV and AIDS, sexually transmitted infection, gender-based violence, drug and alcohol abuse. And when we gathered university students, because university students, especially their first and second years, fall within that age group because it goes up to 24. And we asked them the same question, what is the problem? The problem of them is lack of information. And just before we got into the studio, I was talking with my colleague, and we were talking about previously we had a lot of behavior change communication that was all over. You'd open your radio, you'd open your TV, there are billboards everywhere talking about HIV. We don't see that anymore. And these young people told us that we asked them, what is the solution? What would be the best way of addressing this problem? And the students themselves said, if we're able to use social media. And through funding from UNESCO, we developed a mobile app called RADA. And they actually came with the name themselves, RADA, the slang for being alert. And through that, we are able to put the correct information about all these vices that I've talked about. Drug and alcohol abuse, we got expert information from NACADA. HIV, we got from NASCOP. And put it in a language that is attractive to young people. And they can look at it and access it at their own convenience. As you well know, majority of Kenyans have phones that will be able to, smartphones that they'll be able to get the information. And we keep on updating it. And we also provide counseling services anonymously. They can be able to address these issues. Some of the things they're talking about earlier here, about PrEP, for example. When do you use PrEP? Why should you, be careful about overusing of PrEP and so on? So back to your question, is largely a trend that is rising in that age group. And from my position, it's largely lack of information.
Yeah, are we seeing a correlation between technology development and risky behavior? Because you see, like back in the day, before you got tested for HIV, it was a whole orchestra. In fact, you had to go to the clinic, everywhere you had to make sure nobody sees you. But now, you can simply buy your own testing kits. And we see younger people buying that over the counter. And therefore, they think they know their status, which really leads to more other STIs because it only tests HIV. Is there a correlation between technology development and risky behavior?
Yeah, I could say there is, and maybe because of lack of information. And you're right, technology usually has an advantage and a disadvantage, and especially if you don't use the technology in the correct way. The whole idea of PrEP was not for what it's being used for. So the idea is to teach people, communicate to them the benefits of having a self-testing kit, but also communicate to them the risks of what they're doing so that they know the advantages and the disadvantages. So you're right. Technology needs to be accompanied with information. Why was this thing designed? That is where the problem is. If people understood exactly why this technology was designed and they used it properly, then there would be no problem. But you're right. Not only that, even the social media, the Facebook and all this, the easy access to dating services and so on. It's The technology is not the problem, it's the misuse of the technology.
Okay. Let me bring in Joyce on this. Joyce, what is the problem? Because you see, you'd think that that cohort of 15 to 24, yes, we've made progress in dealing with HIV and the infections are lower, but there seems to be a problem with that cohort of the 15 to 24. Yet they are the ones who are supposed to have as much information as possible. They have access to gadgets, they have access to internet, they have access to TV now. Back in the day, parents would tell you TV no kutoka 7 mpaka 6 and then azimwa. Now they have their own gadgets. So how come there's still a problem with that cohort?
Thank you, Trevor. Good morning, everyone. So before I answer your question on what is the problem, I'm going to first start by reflecting on what I've heard from Dr. Celestine and from Prof. I think it's amazing that the tone has shifted. It's no longer blaming the young people for the epidemic, but now they're also constantly recognizing that young people are surrounded by many other issues that are also contributing to the rising incidences and the HIV prevalence as a whole. So to answer your question, what is the problem? I think the previous speakers have already highlighted what some of the major challenges are. And I'd like to start by mentioning that young people are not a homogeneous group. You've just rightly said now, Trevor, that we have access to gadgets, but that is not the case for every young person or every adolescent between the age of 15 to 24. Having gadgets does not necessarily mean that you have the data, for example, to access this information. Having the data does not mean that you have access to the correct information. So there's very many different levels of challenges that need to be looked into. Another thing that a general assumption has been, and I know Malcolm is going to either come in on this with me or against, is that a lot of young people are being assumed to be on social media and to be social media gurus. I have almost zero understanding of social media. And the things that I follow on social media platforms are definitely, sometimes they're health related because I'm now a programmer. But if I ask some of my other colleagues, they are not necessarily on these platforms to seek information. And that takes me back to what Prof was saying, that we need to put in place multi-faceted approaches, example, when we want to reach young people. So this session today, when you sent me the poster and I was sharing it with my friends, they're like, who wakes up at 6:30 to listen to HIV-related issues? Like, who does that? So these are some of the issues. I mean, yes, we like that because of social media. This session is going to be recorded and then they might be able to see it. This session might also be used in different sessions, for example. So that's a good thing. So to answer your question, there are many problems, but the one main problem that I see is that we are programming for young people as one person. We are programming for young people as one person. I sit here, I can only talk about young women, for example. I can only talk about the experiences of young women living with HIV, but even that, I cannot tell you about the experience of a young woman living with HIV back in the rural area, because my experience is triangulated in this particular space. So what is needed to solve all these many problems that I have not listed yet, because there are many, is to listen to the young people, give them the space to also guide programming right from the designing level all through. I think that has also contributed a lot to where the amazing numbers that Dr. Celestine just mentioned. So again, I'm starting my morning on a high note because this is the first time that conversation about young people did not start in an accusatory tone, did not start in, it's dangerous, we are not doing anything, but started on a positive note. And I think...
Let's flip it. I'm always playing the devil's advocate here, because sometimes they say also that there are young people who have gotten into a mentality of get rich quick. Therefore, they engage in risky behavior for one reason or another. There's a difference between abuse of drugs, but there's also another difference whereby younger people see a life that they've seen on social media and they want to emulate it and they get into risky behavior. Can the young people be squarely blamed for that?
Wow. Can we be blamed for, for wanting to get rich quick?
People have called us a microwave generation, whereby you want to achieve the things you see on social media, whether they're real or not, and you're willing to do anything about it. Therefore, involving yourself in sexual behavior that is risky, because sometimes it comes with some monetary benefits.
Yeah, that's a good question that I'm going to answer very carefully. So I think just recently we saw some trending posts on Kerubo's. There's someone called Kerubo. This one I have to mention. No, because it was a trend that was specifically mentioning some of the rates at which young people are, and I quote, are exposing themselves to HIV, and I also thought that is the basis of also this conversation. So get rich quick, it's there. I mean, for a very long time we've talked about intergenerational sex, transactional sex, and many of those other I wouldn't call them risky. Probably they are explorative. Yeah. Explorative sexual behavior. Why people do this varies and differs from one person to another. But just like you've mentioned, HIV is not, from the people that have engaged with HIV, is manageable now and is not hence considered something that is very threatening. Is
that where the problem really is? The moment everybody thinks this is something manageable, it's like any other disease, it's all right. Yeah. Because when we were growing up, the image of someone who had been infected with HIV and AIDS was devastating. Yes. And you'd be scared. But now, that in itself is stigma. So have we normalized it such that everybody feels that this is like any other disease, like flu, and I'll be fine?
Well, yes, HIV is just like any other. It's not a disease, but it's just like any other condition. And yes, we have the efforts that we've put in to eliminate stigma have also resulted into people saying that we are sugarcoating HIV. This has been said to me many times, and that's why the information is important and how we package this information. I would like to come here, Trevor, and tell you that I definitely do live a normal life. I'd like to come and tell you that I don't mind taking a pill every single day, but I do. And those are some of the information that we are not giving out there, and people end up thinking that living with HIV is all rosy, for example. So I would say the problem is not that we are heading towards eliminating stigma by making people know the truth, that HIV is actually manageable, and HIV is just, it's not just, there is really no need of comparing, but HIV is a manageable condition, and therefore people need not to react to those who have it in a manner that it's discriminatory or in a manner that is stigmatizing. So again, it all goes back to how we are packaging this information, but to talking from the side of the ones already converted. I don't know if that's a good word, but those who are already living with HIV, we would say that this has also really enabled us to be accepted in the society, to be treated with respect and dignity as we are supposed to be. And I'm not going to mention names, but just recently we saw what Kerry did with making people do tests, and if you're HIV positive, then yeah, you're not qualified. You know, those are some of the issues that we are trying to fight. Yeah. You mentioned now earlier on the face of HIV, or a figurine of someone living with HIV, or skeletons and what, and today it's this. You know, so we have progressed, and there is need to continue keeping up with the progress. But then how do we continue to give the right information to ensure that we are not sugarcoating, but we are also not comparing epidemics? Everything has its own advantages and disadvantages.
Interesting. Yeah. Malcolm, what are your thoughts on this? What are we missing?
Thank you very much, Trevor. So I'll start with hii ni generation ya sishauti wangwi. First of all, we need to know that.
Mimi ni last born si shauti wangu.
Yes, mimi ni last born si shauti wangu. So, and one thing about young people is that the attention span is very small. So if you come up with information that is so bulky, information that looks so technical, young people will not listen to you. They will not follow whatever you are saying. So in terms of passing the information to the young people, it should be short, precise, and straight to the point. Yeah. Because let's talk about, for example, TikTok. If you put something more than 1 minute, no person will be on that post listening to whatever information that is being passed. But if you do something like a 30-second straight to the point video with the correct information, then I'm very sure we'll be able to reach a lot of young people with the correct information. Another thing, young people are scared of pregnancy more than HIV, more than the STIs and the STDs. If you take a look at some of these, let me say, high traffic areas, you'll be shocked that on a Monday morning, you'll not find P2s in some of these health facilities around those areas, or even the chemists, even the hospitals. You will not find P2. Why? Because young people are scared of pregnancy. Pregnancy will be, itaonekana. Someone will see that you engaged in raw sex. And what does that mean? If you engage in raw sex, there are a lot of STDs and STIs, and some of these diseases and infections, some of them are worse than even HIV. So if young people are continuing to engaging in raw sex and taking P2, P2 also has long-term consequences. Sio ati ni Panadol unaamka na meza kila siku. It has consequences, and the experts here will tell us the effects of taking some of these pills on a daily basis. So a lot is happening out here amongst the young people. Our interests, our likes, we are a diverse generation, in short. So what is really needed at the moment is a multi-sectoral approach to the issue, because you'll find young people in sports. You'll find young people in agriculture, in digital, in tech. So all these young people have diverse interests. So we need to reach them where they are and where their interests are. So as a multi-sectoral approach, we need each and every agency to fight the stigma and even to fight in reducing the number of new HIV infections amongst the young people.
It's interesting that you raised the issue of young people when you are shouting wangui, but are they also being told the truth? And what does the truth look like for them? Because there's something interesting that I heard Joyce saying, that we've somehow made this conversation so normal that everybody believes getting an infection of HIV and AIDS is okay. Because she said that people want to seem like you don't mind taking a pill every day, but you do.
Yes.
You kweli waambiwe aje so that they understand it. Because you see, the thing is, you don't also want to create stigma.
Yes. So
how do you give them information that they will understand and they will see the magnitude of what you're dealing with at hand?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So just as I've said before, it's a multi-sectoral approach. So in terms of giving out information, first let's go back to the root cause. Wanasemanga samaki mkunje angali mbichi bado. So let's go back. Let's start with those who are still in grade 1. Let's now teach them the right ways. Let's talk to those in high schools and probably in universities. Let's give them the correct information while they are still young, so that when they grow, they know how to differentiate between what is wrong and what is right.
So we start early.
We start early. Okay. For the ones that are old like us. For the ones that are old like us, let's continue developing information, the right and correct information, in the ways that this current generation will understand. For example, as Maisha Youth, some of the activities that we do to reach young people with information, we do road shows across the countries, providing information, doing condom distribution. We host concerts, and through these concerts, we pass the right and correct information to these young people. Just recently, during the WRC in Naivasha, we had a medical camp that was happening in the course of 3 days. We had service provision happening in all the spectators' arenas. And to our surprise, we distributed over 200,000 condoms in the course of the 3 days WRC. So as the rally cars were going on, in the evening, we had this huge concert that the young people came together. We used this platform to pass the right and correct information through the artists, through the DJs, and through the MCs. Apart from concerts, we also did and do pass information through the use of social media, through the use of radio. We go even to the vernacular radio station, down to the community level. Because as my colleague Joyce said, you cannot assume every young person is online.
Okay.
Some of these places, when you go, people still do listen to radio religiously. So let us use those platforms that we can find the young people and pass the right and correct information.
Okay. On that note, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll still continue with this conversation and finding out what really is, where is the problem and what are the solutions going forward. At least from what Dr. Mugambia said, the HIV infection rate is coming down, but it is increasing in a particular cohort, and there's also a bit of risky behavior there. We're trying to find out what really is the gaps when it comes to information. You can also let us know how best this information can be disseminated at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. We're back with your feedback in just a bit as we continue with this discussion. See you shortly.